Hello, I'm Anya Malugan, and for my final project, I created a digital object, which is a series of real photographs which I took, and the AI renditions of those photographs. So, the way that I created this project was I used Capwing's content editing platform, and they have a chatbot called Kai, and it functions very similar to ChatGPT. What I did is I uploaded my original photography into a chat with Kai, and using prompts, I asked it to enhance, recreate, add or subtract various elements from my original photography, and it would recreate its own AI generated version of my photography. And this was definitely a trial and error process because I very quickly realized that Kai is somewhat limited in its um, capabilities of interpreting my prompts. And so I realized I had to be very clear, and my prompts had to be very clear and simplified in order for Kai to create the result that I was looking for. However, we were able to create a series of images um, for my digital object. And using these images, I wanted to observe 8 participants across 4 different generations and their ability to distinguish real imagery from AI generated imagery. I was very inspired to create this specific digital object by Alan Turing's Turing test. Um, and so I called it a visual Turing test, which allows me to see how well my friends and family um, are navigating themselves through a world that is becoming increasingly more interconnected and integrated with AI technology. So, without further ado, let's move on. This is the instruction page that each of my participants viewed before beginning the experiment. I'll just read it aloud very quickly. Thank you for being a willing participant in this visual Turing test field study. Inspired by the original Turing test, the object of this experiment is to observe how well we as humans can tell the difference between a human or machine creation. Today, you will be shown a series of 10 images. Some of the images are real photographs that were taken by Anya on her phone, while other images are AI renderings. Your job is to see how many of the AI images you can identify. You will be shown several slides with 2 pictures on them labeled A and B. On a piece of paper, write down the number of the slide as well as the letter that corresponds to the picture that you think is AI. Once you are content with your answers, you may check how you did at the end of the slideshow. Good luck. You may notice that I worded the instructions very intentionally not to reveal exactly how many pictures are real photographs and exactly how many of the 10 images are AI renderings. And this will become important at the end of the experiment. So this was the first image that my participants were able to see. It's this is my control image set. I wanted to make sure that the first image that my participants saw was very obvious as far as which one was an AI rendering and which one was real. As we move on to the second image pair, it becomes a little less obvious which one is influenced by AI. And as we move on to the third pair, it's even more difficult, especially because I was pleasantly surprised that Kai managed to replicate the neon sign in its um, rendering of my original picture. And that definitely makes it a lot more complicated to tell which one is real and which one is an AI picture. This was a fairly difficult um, image set for all of my participants. It fooled almost everybody, actually. But if you look at it, there are some telltale signs that I'll point out momentarily. And this was the final image set that my participants saw as well. And as you can see, there are not too many differences in these pictures, so it made it very challenging for them. All right, let's check the answers. As you can tell in this one, pretty obviously, image A is the AI rendering. In the second set, B is the AI rendering. In the third set, A is the AI rendering. And if you look closely, you can see that there's actually not that much depth or shadow amongst the flowers. They're all pretty flatly laid amongst one another. Whereas if you zoom in on image B, you can really tell that there's depth there. All right, image four. This one was one of the most difficult. I just quickly want to zoom in on this guy here. You can see that he has a hand coming out on both sides of his arm, which is obviously very peculiar. And if you look at these windows here, they actually look very cartoonish, as does the reflection. And just the more that you stare at this picture on image B here, the more you realize that the perspective is just completely off. It is not, it did not capture the the perspective of image A very well. And if you zoom in on image A, there is a B here. This was taken in the Bellagio in Vegas. And so if we look over an image B, that B has become very distorted. All right. And now the final image set. They're both AI. Um, all of my participants got this one wrong. I did not necessarily set them up for success or prime them to expect that this was a possible option in this experiment, but that was kind of the whole point, is that oftentimes we believe that just because something looks official or is within an official setting, we believe that there is truth in it. And that is actually far from the reality that we're living in. As you can see here, I was very easily able to fool all of my participants into thinking that at least one of these pictures had to be real when they were actually both AI created. So it goes to show how easily the narrative can be um, controlled. All right, let's look at the results. So my original hypothesis before I began this informal observational study is that um, Generation Alpha was going to have the most success in identifying the AI images, and they did. They did have very good success in finding the AI imagery, but as did Generation Z, which I was surprised by. Gen Alpha and Gen Z both scored exactly the same. The millennials, as you can see, had the lowest score of the four generations, which I was actually surprised by. And then the baby boomers did just a little bit better than the millennials, but they also struggled a bit. Here is a bar graph depicting the final scores of this observational study. Once again, as you can see, Gen Alpha and Gen Z, um, they scored exactly the same. And um, the implications of this study, even this is an informal experiment. However, we could infer that perhaps the younger generations are more equipped to recognize when AI is present than older generations are. I would be very interested to conduct this experiment on a much larger scale, with a larger sample and a larger um, and more images within the experiment, but perhaps another time. That is all that I have for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you enjoyed. Thanks. Bye.